10 secret tricks the poor use to survive extreme cold. In the quiet corners of the world where winter does not knock, but barges in like a thief with frozen fingers, there are stories whispered not in books, but between hands held near. Flickering candles. They are not tales of glory or conquest, but of survival, the small, invisible kind that doesn't make headlines. The kind that happens in silence, behind closed doors with frostbitten locks and windows that sigh in the wind. These are the secrets of those who endure, not because they are stronger, but because they have learned the ancient, unspoken tricks, passed from calloused hands to cracked lips, from grandmothers with woolen shawls to children with second-hand socks. And though the world might forget them, you are about to remember. The first secret? The trick of layered time. You might think the poor survive winter by layering clothes. True. But beneath the sweaters and the newspaper-stuffed boots is another kind of layering of time. When you have little, you learn to break the day into warmth pockets. Wake not when the cold is sharpest, but when the sun has had time to lick the rooftops. Tasks are arranged like patches on a quilt, washing done when the sun shines weakly. Through the curtain, meals cooked during the hottest hour, sleep wrapped in the midnight hours when the cold has settled but not yet deepened. They don't fight the cold head-on. They flow around it, scheduling their very breath to match the rhythms of frost and fire. The second secret? The trick of shared heat. Not everyone has a fireplace, but everyone has a body. In villages and urban slums and refugee camps, people gather, not just for conversation, but for warmth. Two bodies pressed back to back share a language that words cannot match. A family of 6 under one blanket does more than stay warm, they stay alive. And the warmth is not just physical. Shared laughter, whispered prayers, bedtime stories, they stir the air, keep the soul from icing over. A room full of bodies becomes a hearth, even if no flame dances. The third trick is almost invisible. The trick of insulation from nothing. No wool? No problem. The poor have mastered the use of air itself. Cardboard becomes wall padding. Plastic bags are tucked between socks. Curtains are sewn from old towels. Windows are lined with bubble wrap, pages of books no one reads anymore, even tinfoil if found. It's not pretty, but it works. They learn. From animals, too, like the straw beds of old. Straw is light, but holds heat. A pile of dry leaves under a blanket might seem laughable to the rich, but to the desperate, it is the difference between numbness and sleep. The fourth trick? The trick of eating fire. Not literally, but almost. A meal heavy in fat, taken before sleep, stokes the internal furnace. In the coldest regions, the poor don't dream of salads, they chew on lard. Oily soups, fatty meats if lucky, or just bread soaked in grease. Calories aren't counted. They are hoarded like embers. Food is heat. Not just for the body, but for the memory. A hot drink handed from a mother to her child becomes an anchor in the storm. A broth, simple as boiled bone and salt, becomes sacred. Fifth, the trick of the candle room. A small room, sealed tight. 1 or 2 candles burning, not enough to warm the air, but enough to trick the mind. The flickering glow reflects in the eyes, mimicking sunlight, stirring a faint flush in the cheeks. The room feels warmer. And with heavy blankets and bodies huddled close, it often becomes so. A tin can, a wick, some leftover oil. These are alchemy tools in the hands of the poor. The flame is not luxury. It is rebellion. The sixth trick may surprise you. The trick of movement without motion. Even when resting, the poor learn to move. Not wildly, not visibly, but in small rituals. Clenching toes, tensing fingers, shifting weight. A kind of static dance to keep the blood from stiffening. The elderly, especially, become maestros of this silent ballet. They hum and rock, mutter and sway. It keeps the frost from settling into their bones. Stillness is a luxury for the well-insulated. For those without, stillness is a thief. The seventh trick is older than fire. The trick of the earth blanket. In many places, the ground is warmer than the air. Dugout shelters, half-buried homes, rooms built below staircases, under floors, behind bookcases. These become havens. Dirt retains heat. A floor layered with rugs, with sacks, with thick cardboard or old coats becomes a stage for dreams. In the coldest nights, the poor lie close to the earth, not because they have fallen, but because the earth remembers warmth long after the air has forgotten. The eighth secret? The trick of sleep as escape. Cold is cruelest when one is awake to feel it. And so, sleep becomes medicine. Entire days are slept through when the cold is unbearable. The body conserves energy. The mind avoids despair. Children are wrapped and lulled to sleep mid-morning, only to wake at dusk for a small warm meal. Time stretches. Reality pauses. This sleep is not laziness. It is strategy. The ninth trick is tender. The trick of story-worn souls. A tale told well can outlast a fire. Around candles, around stoves, around nothing at all, stories are passed like loaves of bread. Of warmer days, of sunlit gardens, of impossible summers. The poor learn to craft warmth from words, and while the body shivers, the mind is led elsewhere too. Beaches, to laughter, to memories where cold has no claws. And the 10th? Perhaps the most powerful. The trick of dignity in darkness. Poverty strips many things, but the poor guard their dignity like an ember under ash. Even when the coat is torn, it is straightened. Even when the shoes leak, they are laced. Even when the food is meager, it is shared. There is pride in survival, in defiance. In greeting the morning with breath still warm, heart still beating. The poor do not endure winter. They face it with quiet heroism the world rarely sees. Now as you sit beneath your own roof, perhaps with tea in hand or fire at your feet, let this thought linger. Survival is not a single act. It is 1,000 quiet tricks stitched together by hands that refuse to surrender. And that, dear listener, is the true warmth of winter. To understand the ways the poor survive the cold, you must first unlearn what you know about warmth. For most, heat is a switch, a dial, a setting on a thermostat. It's a button pressed without thought, a flicker of gas, or a hum from the radiator. But for those who live on the edge of winter's mercy, warmth is a ritual earned, negotiated, stitched together with fragments of ingenuity and memory. The poor do not battle the cold with luxury. They dance with it in small, stubborn steps. And in that dance, more secrets emerge. The 11th trick? The trick of rotating warmth. When resources are few, one heated stone, one working blanket, one spot near a stove. Families rotate. A child sits closest first, then the elder, then the mother who's been standing by the door. They pass the warmth like a gift, like a lit torch that must keep moving lest it go out. It's not just physical. It teaches fairness, patience, and the power of giving when one has nearly nothing. The 12th trick is hidden in plain sight. The trick of humble architecture. Shacks and shelters in poor communities are often seen as flimsy. But look closer. You'll notice ceilings dropped low to trap heat. Doors aligned with the rising sun. Walls layered with whatever's available, not always pretty, but purposeful. Every piece of cardboard nailed to a wall is a strategy. Every tarp stretched overhead, every curtain hung from a wire, is an act of design born of survival instinct. 13th trick? The trick of warm corners. Even in a room too large to heat entirely, the poor know to shrink their world. Blankets hung from ropes create tents inside bedrooms. Closets become sleeping quarters. A kitchen table is covered in blankets to form a den where children sleep side by side, their breath creating a shared atmosphere. In Japanese homes, the concept of a kotatsu, a low table covered with a blanket and a heat source beneath, is a cousin to this trick. But among the poor, there is no purchase design, just resourceful love. The 14th trick feels almost magical. The trick of pre-warmed beds. When heat is not available, the bed is prepared like a sacred space. Stones are heated by fire, then wrapped in cloth and placed under covers before bedtime. Water bottles, metal cans, even dried beans warmed and wrapped do the job. The bed is transformed into a nest, not with money, but with time and care. And before anyone lies down, hands test the sheets, adjust the layers, ensure it holds the precious heat. It's not luxury, it's intention. The 15th trick is ancient. The trick of animal companionship. In many parts of the world, animals are more than pets or livestock. They are radiators with heartbeats. Dogs, cats, even chickens are brought inside during winter nights. Not out of sentiment, but strategy. A sleeping dog beside a child is a furnace that breathes. This trick is primal. It dates back to caves and huts, to shepherds sleeping beside their flocks. In the cold, warmth is shared across species without shame. The 16th, the trick of layering not just clothes, but thought. Mental strength is part of survival. The poor prepare their minds for winter as deliberately as they prepare their homes. They expect discomfort. They brace for it. They do not waste energy on wishing it were different. A positive memory is placed beneath the mental shirt, then a layer of humor, then one of prayer, then one of purpose. By the time they step out into the wind, they are armored not only in fabric, but in story. The 17th trick might seem odd. The trick of darkness. When fuel is precious, light is rationed. Darkness is not feared, it is used. Families rise with the sun and sleep with its departure. In homes without electricity, nighttime is for huddling, dreaming, listening to the creak of ice and the breath of loved ones. Without screens or bulbs, the body slows, the metabolism shifts, the energy is stored. The cold becomes less cruel when the night is welcomed rather than fought. The 18th trick? The trick of repetition. Cold saps energy, so the poor develop rhythms that require less thinking. A morning routine that is always the same. A method of layering socks just so. A pattern to boil water and ration tea. These repeated actions conserve mental energy and give a sense of control in an otherwise unpredictable world. It's not mindless, it's mastery. The 19th trick? The trick of knowing when to ask. Pride can be deadly in winter. The poor know when to knock on a neighbor's door, when to share a loaf, when to trade a story for a piece of firewood. The cold teaches humility and community. One cannot outlast winter alone. A shared coat, a communal pot of soup, a borrowed blanket. These are not charity. They are survival agreements. And the 20th? Perhaps the most powerful of all. The trick of remembering spring. The poor survive winter not because they forget the cold, but because they remember the thaw. They tell stories of seasons past. They trace the shape of leaves not yet born. They speak of flowers as if they were friends, of sunshine as if it were already returning. In a room where frost forms on the walls, someone will say, "It's already February. The worst is nearly over." And even if it's not true, it becomes a lifeline. Hope is not a luxury for the poor. It is a necessity, a trick, a medicine. And so, with each night survived, each finger unnumbed, each shared meal and muttered prayer, they walk through winter with a knowledge the world often forgets. You don't beat the cold by being richer than it. You survive it by being more human than it. The third lesson in this long winter tale is not found in books, nor in manuals of survival, but in the worn fingertips of those who have touched the walls of cold nights and lived to smile again. Because surviving the extreme cold when you are poor is not about outsmarting nature. It's about bending with it like an old tree that creaks but does not break. The 21st trick? The trick of invisible layers. You won't find high-performance thermal gear in the closets of the poor, but you will find old tie shirts beneath. Sweaters, newspapers stuffed between socks and solace. plastic bags wrapped around feet before shoes. You will find scarves made from cut curtains, hats from sweater sleeves, and entire outfits stitched from remnants. To the outsider, it may seem ragged, but to those who live it, it's armor crafted from memory, utility, and resilience. Every layer tells a story and holds warmth like a secret. The 22nd trick is equally humble. The trick of one-room living. In homes where heating is a luxury, the poor instinctively shrink their world to a single space. The entire family sleeps, eats, talks, and rests in the warmest corner. Furniture is moved. Mattresses are pulled together. Dishes are washed less to avoid cold water. All non-essential rooms become forgotten lands, closed off until the thaw. This compression of life is not a sign of limitation. It is a focus on what truly matters: staying alive, staying together. The 23rd trick? The trick of homemade heat sources. Not all heat comes from fire or fuel. Sometimes it comes from salt and rice, sewn into fabric pouches and warmed in pans. Sometimes it comes from bricks heated in ovens or iron pots left on stoves after cooking. These objects hold the warmth and are carried into beds, placed under feet, or clutched in hands like totems of survival. Nothing is wasted, not even warmth itself. It is captured, stored, shared, honored. The 24th trick is older than civilization. The trick of movement. The poor know that to sit too long is to freeze, so they move not always by choice, but by ritual. Sweeping floors again, chopping wood, beating blankets, fetching water, washing by hand. Movement becomes both necessity and design. Even children learn the dance, how to keep their bodies from surrendering to stillness. A cold body is a vulnerable one. A moving body is alive, alert, resistant. The 25th trick? The trick of cold meals. When fuel is scarce, not every meal can be cooked. The poor learn to accept and adapt. Bread and onion, rice soaked overnight, leftovers eaten cold to save on heating. Sometimes the only warmth in a meal is the warmth of the hands that prepared it, and when food is warm, it is shared with reverence. Even soup becomes sacred. The 26th trick touches the soul. The trick of ritual. To break the monotony of suffering, rituals are created. A song before bed, a candle lit at the same hour, a prayer whispered when breath turns visible in the air. These rituals don't warm the skin, but they warm the heart, which in turn helps the body survive. The cold tries to make everything mechanical. The poor resist by staying human. The 27th trick. The trick of time travel. No, not the kind with machines. The kind with memory. A grandmother remembers how winters used to be harsher and says so aloud, so the children believe this one is not so bad. A father tells stories of his own childhood, how he slept with a dog, how he stole coal, how he survived. In these tales, the present is reframed, not as suffering, but as continuity. This trick doesn't change the temperature. It changes perception. And perception is survival. The 28th trick is painfully beautiful. The trick of beauty itself. In the midst of frostbite, of leaks in the roof and cracked fingers, someone still hangs a curtain. Someone still makes the bed. Someone still places a flower, even if wilted, on the window. The poor know that to survive is not merely to breathe. It is to preserve dignity, to create order, softness, even beauty in the face of harshness. That beauty is not excess. It is defiance. The 29th trick? The trick of teaching the young. Children raised in cold homes learn by example. They are taught how to layer, how to prepare, how to share, how to listen to the wind. Survival is passed down not through panic, but through presence. A child who knows how to warm a stone, how to stretch a meal, how to recognize the signs of frostbite, becomes a carrier of ancestral wisdom. The poor do not just endure, they teach how to endure. And finally, the 30th trick, the quietest of them all. The trick of silence. In the deepest cold, words freeze. Mouths stay closed. Thoughts turn inward. The home falls quiet not from sadness, but from conservation. Every sound feels heavier. Every breath is measured. In this silence, something awakens, the awareness of being alive, of being present, of being more than the cold. The poor learn to sit with the silence and hear what others miss, the heartbeat of the house, the creak of the walls, the whisper of the soul. And in that space, they find strength not given by heaters or wealth, but by the sheer miracle of still existing. This is not fiction. This is not exaggeration. This is how survival is written into the skin and spirit of those who face the cold with empty wallets but full hearts. The wind does not knock on doors with politeness. It forces its way through cracks, through the thin wood of forgotten homes, and into the ribs of those who live inside. For the poor, cold is not seasonal, it is structural. It seeps through the walls and into the rhythm of life. But within this harshness, you will find something even more powerful. Ingenuity. The 31st trick is what elders call the trick of shared breath. Two people under one blanket share more than warmth. They share breath, humidity, and body. Heat, and when space is tight, this becomes a necessity. Babies sleep between parents. Siblings sleep foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder. It is not always comfortable, but it is deeply efficient. One body might shiver alone. Two bodies survive together. And so beds are no longer individual. They are communal fire pits. The 32nd trick is humble but sacred. The trick of the iron kettle. In many homes without central heat, the iron kettle becomes more than a cooking tool. It becomes a centerpiece of survival. Heated over coals or firewood, it sits beside beds or under tables. The warm metal radiates through the night. Water kept inside is not just for tea, it's for touch. Dipping cloths in warm water, wrapping fingers, defrosting toes. The kettle doesn't speak, but it listens. It gives. The 33rd trick is ancient. The trick of walling the wind. If windows let in the cold, they are covered with plastic, cardboard, or blankets. Curtains become shields. Newspapers become insulation. Furniture is moved to block drafts. Even rugs are nailed to walls when needed. The poor do not surrender to the structure of a home. They remake it. They rebuild warmth with what others throw away. To wall, the wind is not to stop it entirely. It is to resist it with whatever remains. The 34th trick walks silently. The trick of wool, above wealth. Among the poor, the most prized possession in winter is not gold, not phones, not furniture. It is a wool blanket, passed down through generations, heavy, rough, reliable. When nights stretch longer than hope, it is the wool that speaks, telling stories of grandmothers, of first winters, of promises made beside dying embers. The poor know a good wool blanket can save a life, and so they are never far from reach. The 35th trick is rarely mentioned. The trick of hidden warmth. When gloves are scarce, socks are pulled over hands. When coats are thin, newspapers are stuffed between shirts. When blankets run out, pets are invited under the covers, not for affection, but for heat. Even cooking becomes a strategy. Baking bread is not only for food, it heats the kitchen. Doing laundry in hot water heats the bathroom. Every act has double meaning. Every resource is used twice. Waste is luxury. The 36th trick is stoic. The trick of stillness without surrender. When the cold is unbearable, and there's nothing left to burn, the poor learn how to slow the body, to move less, to think slower, to breathe shallower, to preserve. They become like bears, like seeds. Under snow, not giving up but hibernating in place. There's a dignity in this slowness, a control that wealth does not teach, because sometimes survival is about waiting without losing yourself. The 37th trick is musical. The trick of humming. Humming in the cold is more than comfort. It's movement. It vibrates the chest. It moves the lungs. It keeps blood flowing. Elders hum lullabies they barely remember. Children hum just to hear something other than wind. And in this sound, There's warmth. Not the warmth of temperature, but the warmth of being human. The 38th trick is invisible. The trick of grudgelessness. Strangely, among the poor, you will find less anger about the cold than you might expect. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because they've learned resentment burns energy. And energy is needed to survive. So they let go of blame, of what ifs, of injustice for now. Because hate makes you cold inside. And they cannot afford any more cold. Instead, they light candles, not for light, but for ceremony. They cook together, not just for nutrition, but for spirit. They live forward. Even if tomorrow is colder than today. The 39th trick is communal. The trick of shared fire. In rural areas or tight neighborhoods, fire is not hoarded. One family lights the stove. Others come. Meals are shared. Stories are told. Elders pass around tea. The fire becomes a place of gathering, of memory, of protection. And when fuel runs low, someone always finds more, because warmth is a shared currency. The poor may have little, but when they combine what they have, it becomes enough. And finally, the 40th trick, the one not taught, only lived. The trick of outlasting. To outlast cold is not just physical, it is spiritual. The poor know that every winter ends, that spring always comes, even if late. And so they endure, not just by surviving, but by refusing to be erased. They laugh when they can. They cry when they must. They sing when they don't know what else to do, because winter may be ruthless, but so are they. The cold is a sculptor. It chisels not only the body, but the spirit. And those who endure it with little do not emerge unchanged. They emerge wiser, leaner, more precise in what they value. There is no space for excess in winter's grip. Everything must serve. Every act must warm. Every silence must be purposeful. The 41st trick is what some call the trick of the small fire. To the wealthy, a roaring fire is luxury. To the poor, it is waste. A small flame, carefully guarded, offers heat without greed. It is a practice of humility, of conservation. A candle beneath a tin can creates a personal stove. A clay pot with embers beneath the bed keeps feet warm through the night. Small fires are not weak, they are focused. They teach restraint. The 42nd trick is a lesson in texture. The trick of layered living, rather than relying on one thick coat or blanket. The poor become masters of layering shirts over shirts, socks over socks, bags under shirts, even newspapers between layers. Each barrier traps air, and trapped air insulates. Layers also allow for adaptability. If the day warms slightly, one layer comes off. If a gust of wind returns, it goes back on. The poor dress like the weather might betray them at any second, because it often does. The 43rd trick is ancestral. The trick of ground avoidance. Cold rises from below. The earth is a quiet thief of body heat. So the poor raise their sleeping places, wooden pallets, layers of cardboard, straw, or old mattresses stacked. Anything to create distance from the floor. Even children know sleeping directly on the ground in winter is an invitation to illness. Warmth is found not just in heat, but in the height from which you sleep. The 44th trick is invisible to most. The trick of heated stones. Before bed, some heat stones in fires or ovens. Wrap them in fabric and place them at the foot of their beds. The warmth radiates slowly through the night. These stones, smooth from years of use, become family heirlooms. Passed down like legends. A grandmother might whisper, "This stone saw the coldest night of 1947. And suddenly, it's not just warmth, it's memory. The 45th trick lives in rhythm. The trick of movement without travel. When it's too cold to go outside, movement becomes internal. Squats in the corner, marching in place, clapping games, storytelling with gestures, dancing slowly to no music at all. They do not exercise. They preserve circulation. They do not run. They awaken warmth from within. Even laughter, when deep enough, can warm the ribs. The 46th trick is dietary. The trick of intentional eating. Certain foods heat the body more than others. Garlic, ginger, chili, beans, potatoes. The poor learn not just to eat, but to eat wisely. Stews simmer for hours, not for taste alone, but to extract every drop of heat from the pot into the air. And meals are not rushed. Eating is warmth. Eating is togetherness. Eating is resistance to the cold outside. The 47th trick is sacred. The trick of song. In many communities, winter songs are passed down not to celebrate, but to survive. Chants, humming, refrains, they give rhythm to tasks. They give comfort to silence. They pass time. They link generations. A child singing what their great-grandfather sang while stoking a fire is not just making noise, they are continuing a legacy of endurance. The 48th trick is psychological. The trick of celebrating the cold. When you cannot escape something, you make it a friend. Some poor communities throw winter festivals, not extravagant, but heartfelt. They name their fires. They tell stories about the cold like it's a guest. At the table, this reframing, this act of turning suffering into story, gives the mind a way through. It says, if we dance with the cold, it cannot defeat us. The 49th trick is tactical. The trick of night preparation. Before night falls, the poor prepare. Water is boiled. Clothes are dried. Spaces are sealed. Blankets are shaken and laid out. Food is cooked in bulk. Fires are stoked and embers arranged. Because they know, when the sun drops, it drops fast. And being unprepared at night is dangerous. The cold does not wait for you to catch up. And finally, the 50th trick. The trick that binds them all. The trick of dignity. It is easy to look at poverty and see only lack. But in these these silent, clever, deeply human strategies, there is no shame. There is elegance, precision, wisdom. The poor do not survive cold by accident. They survive it through art. And though their names are not remembered in books, their warmth lives on in the tricks they shared, in the lives they saved, in the songs that still echo beneath heavy blankets and quiet, flickering light. The 6th layer of winter is not made of fabric. It is made of silence. There is a moment, often just before dawn, when the frost is at its fiercest. When breath becomes fog and the sky feels heavy with the weight of unshed snow. It is then that the poor know to be still. Not out of fear, but reverence. The cold is strongest when unchallenged. And the secret, the sacred trick, is knowing when to move and when to let the cold pass through without resistance. The 51st trick is simple. The trick of the shared breath. In rooms with many people, warmth accumulates not just from bodies, but from exhalation. Windows are sealed. Gaps under doors are blocked. The air becomes dense, but also warmer. Each breath contributes to the invisible cocoon of survival. Mothers teach children to breathe through scarves, not just to warm their lungs, but to warm the space they share. The house does not breathe like a person. It breathes like a family. The 52nd trick is ancient. The trick of fireless cooking. When resources are scarce, fuel is precious. The poor learn to pre-boil, to pre-cook, to soak grains overnight, to use thermal retention cookers fashioned from blankets and boxes. Rice finishes in silence. Beans soften slowly in hay-lined baskets. There is power in knowing how to cook with almost nothing, and warmth in knowing you don't need flame to feed. The 53rd trick is tactile. The trick of constant contact. Skin to skin. Shoulder to shoulder. Sleeping close, sometimes in shifts. A child pressed against a parent. Two siblings wrapped around one another like roots from the same tree. In the coldest regions, entire families sleep in the same bed, not out of affection alone, but out of necessity. Warmth is a communal task. Distance, in winter, is dangerous. The 54th trick is auditory. The trick of sound memory. When the night is quiet, the cold seems louder. So the poor fill their homes with remembered sound stories told aloud. Old radio shows, lullabies that have lost their words, but not their melody. Sound keeps the mind from sinking into the loneliness of frost. Some even whistle gently into the air, not to summon, but to remind themselves they are still here. The 55th trick is emotional. The trick of the warm object, a piece of cloth sewn by a grandmother, a mug passed down, a rock from a childhood path that still holds sunlight in memory. These objects, small, often dismissed, become totems of endurance. When held, they warm. Not the hands, but the spirit. And the poor know, sometimes, it's the memory of warmth that saves more than the warmth itself. The 56th trick is in sound. The trick of the singing floor. In old homes, floorboards creak when stepped upon. But in poor homes, those creaks become a symphony of safety. If a board doesn't creak, someone listens. If a window rattles, someone seals it. Even in the stillness of night, a home has a language, and those who dwell in it know how to read its warnings. In extreme cold, awareness is warmth. The 57th trick is herbal. The trick of the bitter brew, dandelion root, elderberry, nettle, mullein. Even in winter, the poor remember the herbs of summer, dried, stored, honored. A bitter tea not only warms the body but heals it. Colds are chased away not by pills but by sips of something ancient and earthy. When medicine is distant, plants become memories. Pharmacy. The 58th trick is atmospheric. The trick of the lit corner. A single lantern in the right place can warm the heart of a room. The poor position their light carefully, not for brightness, but for comfort. A corner illuminated means hope still burns. Shadows carefully arranged become comforting rather than ominous. They are not afraid of the dark. They just know how to soften it. The 59th trick is generational. The trick of teaching through tasks. Children are not spared the cold. They are taught how to endure it, how to gather, how to layer, how to build, how to notice the wind, how to listen for ice. Each lesson passed down is not just practical, it is protective. To prepare a child for the cold is to love them completely. And the 60th trick, like all the great ones, is invisible. The trick of speaking warmly. In homes with no heat, voices become softer, kinder. Conflict is postponed. Tone becomes a tool. Words are chosen with care, because the wrong sentence in winter cuts deeper than a cold wind. In poor homes, you learn quickly. Harsh words lower the temperature. Kind ones can raise it. As we rest in the middle of this journey through the hidden arts of survival, we begin to see something clearly, perhaps for the first time. The poor are not just survivors of the cold. They are its secret poets, its quiet masters, and while the world may ignore them, winter never forgets their brilliance. There are moments in winter where time itself seems to pause. Not in the poetic sense, but in the bodily sense. Fingers slow, blinks stretch longer. Thoughts take the long route. In that moment, just before the shiver, the poor know what the wealthy often forget, that warmth is not a luxury. It's a discipline. The 61st trick is visual. The trick of the reflected flame. One flame can warm a room, but if you place behind it a surface, metal, mirror, stone polished by time, you reflect both light and heat. The poor know this. They tilt old pots, broken spoons, shards of glass behind candles, not for elegance, but for expansion. A room becomes brighter, a breath warmer. The cold grows confused, not knowing where the fire ends and the reflection begins. The 62nd trick is behavioral. The trick of small movements. In great cold, the temptation is to move fast, to dance, to jump. But the poor know to pace themselves. Small, deliberate movements, rolling ankles, circling shoulders, tightening, and relaxing fists. They are motions of survival, not spectacle. These micro-movements preserve energy. They tell the body, we are still alive. We are not in danger. Keep going. The 63rd trick is practical. The trick of heating stones. A stone warmed in the fire, wrapped in cloth, and placed under blankets, holds heat for hours. Long after the flame dies, the poor pass these stones from feet to belly to back to shared beds. Each transfer is not just warmth, it is an inheritance. In villages long buried by time, this practice was sacred. A good stone was named, cared for. It wasn't just an object. It was a guardian. The 64th trick is adaptive. The trick of the indoor sun. When real sunlight is rare, the poor learn to simulate it. Colors are chosen for rooms: yellows, deep oranges, ochres. These aren't just decorations, they're psychological fire. A wall painted warm tricks the eye, and eventually the body, into remembering summer. In homes where the wind howls, this illusion of sun becomes a silent ally. The 65th trick is communal. The trick of the rotating fire. When wood is low, fires are built in shifts. One household burns for 3 hours, then another. Warmth travels between homes like an honored guest. Children carry embers. Elders carry stories. The fire never dies, it simply migrates. This system doesn't just conserve fuel. It builds invisible threads of belonging. The 66th trick is observational. The trick of the wind's voice. The poor do not need forecasts. They listen to the creak of the roof, to the bend of the trees, to the whistle in the chimney. The wind speaks and the poor translate. They know which windows to seal tighter, which wall to lean a blanket against, which hour will be the coldest. It's not superstition. It's listening with the whole body. The 67th trick is symbolic. The trick of the protective circle. Some draw circles in ash around stoves. Others place salt near doors. It may look like magic to outsiders, but it's deeper than that. It's ritual, passed through generations, carried like a lantern. It says, this home is protected. And belief, whether in science, superstition, or spirit, warms in ways fire cannot. The 68th trick is musical. The trick of the work song. When chores must be done in the cold, songs are used to carry them. A rhythm to chopping wood. A hum while hanging wet clothes near the fire. These aren't performances. They're breath turned into strength. The body moves easier when it dances. And when it dances, it forgets the ache in its joints, the sting in its skin. The 69th trick is ancestral. The trick of remembered winters. Every generation has a cold season that defined them. A snowfall so deep it swallowed fences. A wind so sharp it cracked the windows. The poor retell these stories not to frighten but to prepare. We survived. That, they say, we will survive this. Memory becomes a second coat. And the 70th trick, carried like a secret between ribs, is emotional. The trick of finding beauty. Even in cracked walls and frozen breaths, the poor find something to admire. A snowflake on a window pane, the way steam curls from soup, the silence after a shared laugh. These are embers of wonder, and wonder, above all, defies the cold. Because where there is awe, there's a liveness. Because while the rich insulate themselves with things, the poor insulate themselves with meaning. In this world of frozen mornings and slow hours, these tricks are not desperation. They are ingenuity, wisdom born from necessity. And every single one says the same truth. You may lack comfort, but you will never lack power. In winter, silence grows teeth. The kind of silence that creeps through cracks in walls, that hums between breaths, the kind that waits, watching, testing. It doesn't knock. It seeps. And for those without central heat or thermal walls, it's not poetic, it's tactical. Survival in cold is not one with strength. It is one with attention. And that brings us to more truths the poor know by heart. The 71st trick is improvisational. The trick of the layered bed. Not all beds are created equal, but they can be made warmer. The poor know that heat escapes downward, so they build beds in layers. Worn-out sweaters become base pads. Newspapers, yes, newspapers are laid beneath sheets. Blankets are stacked not just on top, but tucked tightly around every edge, forming a cocoon where body heat stays prisoner. A well-wrapped bed can become a furnace. The 72nd trick is about timing the fire dot when there's not enough fuel. For fire through the night, they don't light it at bedtime. They light it a few hours before sleep, warming the space, then extinguish it before lying down. Why? Because a cold bed warmed by a fire invites too sharp a contrast. But a cooled fire warming a body already generating heat? That's endurance. The poor learn to sleep through gradients, not shocks. The 73rd trick is culinary. The trick of spice and fat. Certain foods warm from the inside. A spoonful of animal fat before sleep. A sprinkle of black pepper in every stew. A clove of garlic with bread. These aren't just flavors. They're thermogenic agents. In small huts and stone shelters, you'll find pots bubbling with things the rich discard. Bones, roots, dried herbs. Each chosen not for cost, but for heat. The 74th trick is architectural. The trick of blocking the north. Even with no money for renovation, the poor observe their homes. The north wind is always the harshest, so furniture is shifted. Beds placed away from northern walls. Tables moved near southern exposure. A single curtain, blanket, or cardboard sheet on the right side can change a room's temperature by degrees. They don't rebuild houses. They reorient them. The 75th trick is mechanical. The trick of shared breath. In rooms where the cold slices, families sleep together, not just out of love but strategy. Human bodies emit heat. 3 people in a bed don't feel 3 times warmer. They feel 5. Infants are held close. Elders placed in the center. Even pets are included. Not as companions, but as fireless furnaces. The 76th trick is tactile. The trick of touch memory. The poor teach their hands to know cold better than gloves. Before putting anything on, they touch. Door handles, window seams, stove legs. Not to fix, but to understand. A hand that knows where the cold enters becomes a mapmaker of warmth. They patch what matters. They ignore what doesn't. Efficiency is the only luxury they allow themselves. The 77th trick is spiritual. The trick of the morning fire. Some light a match at dawn not for heat, but for blessing. A candle, a scrap of bark. A whisper to ancestors. Cold, they say, is not just an element. It's a force. And it must be greeted. To speak to the cold is to take control of it, to remind it, I see you. You are strong, but not stronger than my will. The 78th trick is social. The trick of the warm exchange. The poor do not hoard warmth. When someone enters, they're offered soup, gloves, a coat not in use. Not because they have plenty, but because they know the price of withholding. Warmth, when shared, multiplies. In neighborhoods overlooked by maps, you'll find these silent exchanges, scarves swapped, firewood split, porches cleared of snow by unseen hands. Cold builds fences. The poor build bridges. The 79th trick is meditative. The trick of stillness. To survive extreme cold, sometimes you must stop fighting it. Sit, wrap, breathe, let the body's rhythm regulate. In stillness, you lose less. The poor know that movement burns calories. And calories are gold. So they learn to still themselves like monks. A kind of cold-induced trance. Eyes closed, muscles soft, heart steady. The storm howls outside, but inside, silence reigns. And the 80th trick? It is emotional. The trick of expecting spring. No one survives winter by pretending it's summer. But neither do they survive by believing it will last forever. The poor hold Somewhere deep, the knowledge that seasons change, that green follows gray. That warmth is not a gift, it is a return. And that everything the cold takes, the sun will one day offer back. This hope is not naive, it is chosen. Cultivated like fire, it burns quietly, invisibly. But it's there, in the soft fold of a shared blanket, in the whisper before sleep. We've done this before, we can do it again. In the ritual of one more dawn. By the time January has grown tired of being cruel, and February starts pretending to be merciful, those who have endured without central heating, down jackets, or double glazed windows carry something more than frostbite in their bones. They carry wisdom. And this wisdom, passed quietly without ceremony, is where the final secrets reside. The 81st trick is acoustic. The trick of listening for warmth. It sounds strange, doesn't it? But the poor learn to hear temperature. They know that. The wind changes pitch as it squeezes through loose windows. They know the difference between the pop of dry firewood and the hiss of damp logs. They can hear when the kettle boils wrong, too fast, too soon, meaning the room is colder than it was yesterday. And in this way, they listen not just for survival but for warning. The cold speaks. They've learned to understand its language. The 82nd trick is optical. The trick of seeing the invisible. They don't use infrared cameras, they use breath. Watching the way it curls, where it vanishes faster, where it lingers tells them where the cold lives. A draft is traced by the ghost of an exhale. In kitchens, they know which wall is colder by the way the steam from a pot bends. In bedrooms, they hang strips of cloth not for decoration, but to observe their movement. If it flutters, the air is betraying them. This is not paranoia. It's observation, sharpened by necessity. The 83rd trick is habitual. The trick of cold rituals. Every action becomes a choreography against the chill. Slippers are always by the bed, never forgotten. Water is boiled in the morning, whether you need tea or not, because that steam means something warm has begun. Jackets aren't hung by the door, they are aired first, their warmth preserved. Curtains are drawn not by instinct, but by the sun's pattern. A poor home in winter functions like a clock made of small movements, each designed to trap heat, fend off frost, and remind the body that rhythm itself can be insulation. The 84th trick is secretive. The trick of hidden warmth. They place stones by the fire and later tuck them under blankets or into coat pockets. They fill bottles with boiling water and wrap them in old clothes, not just to hold, but to bury in their bedding like tiny suns. Some even carry small jars of fat or oil in pockets, subtle, discreet, and always warm to the touch. Touch, after all, is sometimes the only thing that believes you're still alive. The 85th trick is paradoxical. The trick of not chasing warmth. When a person poor in resources tries too hard to stay warm, moving too fast, eating too much too early, burning fuel too soon, they exhaust what little they have. So instead, they learn to dance with the cold, let it touch their skin without flinching, let it enter their breath without panic. The poor learn to befriend discomfort, just enough to delay desperation. There's grace in that. A kind of humility that says, I will not fight every moment. Some I will endure. The 86th trick is aesthetic. The trick of the warm illusion. They use color. Walls painted in warm tones. Blankets in deep reds, golden ochres, and sunset browns. Candles. Not just for light, but to shift perception. When the body sees warmth, it prepares for it. Even if the air is cold, the mind can be softened. The illusion isn't a lie, it's a kindness. A signal to the nervous system. Hold on, you're not alone. The 87th trick is ancestral. The trick of the story fire. Before bed. Stories are told. Tales of other winters. Of harder times. Of those who made it through with less. These aren't distractions. They're incantations. Each story is a blanket passed down. A reminder that survival isn't just physical, it's narrative. The poor know that as long as the story continues, So do they. And stories, unlike firewood, never run out. The 88th trick is poetic. The trick of naming the cold. They call it things. The biter, the thin knife, old man, the gray one. Naming it makes it smaller, makes it personal. You can speak to it, curse it, laugh at it. Once it has a name, it's no longer a monster, it's just a visitor. Annoying, yes, but bearable. And sometimes, that shift in framing is enough to survive another night. The 89th trick is familial. The trick of assigned warmth. Everyone has a role. One child warms the spoons. Another sets the slippers by the fire. Someone checks for ice on the windows. Someone else tells the weather by the color of the morning frost. It's not delegation, it's participation. When everyone has a job in preserving warmth, everyone feels responsible. And that responsibility becomes belonging. And the 90th trick? It is sacred. The trick of remembering why survive the cold. Because a garden waits beneath the snow. Because there is a letter yet to be read. Because someone is coming back in spring. Because a song has not yet been sung. The poor do not endure winter for its own sake. They endure it for the promise that follows. And that promise, fragile as it may seem, is sometimes the strongest fire of all. When you've lived through enough winters without luxury, you learn that survival isn't always dramatic. It's rarely the heroism of frostbitten fingers or epic treks through snow. More often, it's the mundane, the quiet, the almost invisible acts that keep you alive. And that's where the final truth lies. The 91st trick is internal. The trick of memory warmth. The poor often travel through their minds when their bodies are cold. They remember a summer day that seemed to stretch forever, the smell of bread from a better time, the warmth of a hand once held. Memory becomes insulation. They layer themselves in moments that can't be taken by frost. Some close their eyes and walk, barefoot through remembered meadows. Others imagine laughter they once knew, using it to boil the shadows of the night. It's not escape. It's survival through softness. The 92nd trick is metaphysical. The trick of believing in spring. Not hoping. Believing. Because hope flickers. Belief roots. The poor don't merely wish for warmth. They know it's coming. They know the sun will stretch a little longer, that ice will loosen its grip, that buds will break from branch and remind the world that nothing stays frozen forever. And this belief, etched into their bones like a seasonal rhythm, gives them the patience that the wealthy never needed to cultivate. The 93rd trick is philosophical. The trick of finding meaning in cold. It's easy to curse winter, but the poor, over time, begin to ask, what is the cold teaching me? Is it humility? Resilience? Is it the stillness I avoided all year? Is it forcing me to notice the rhythm of breath, the value of a small flame, the weight of my own presence? This reframing turns endurance into enlightenment. Even frostbite becomes a scripture. The 94th trick is medicinal. The trick of self-warming touch. A hand to the chest, palms pressed together, rubbing feet before bed. These aren't just gestures. They're rituals passed down by ancestors who had no medicine, no heating, no rescue. They touch themselves not just to warm, but to remind the body, you are here. You are alive. You are worth tending to. Self-care, when done in desperation, becomes holy. The 95th trick is communal. The trick of shared stillness. When the fire dies down and the silence grows thick, the poor sit together, not talking, not moving, just breathing in the same space. No entertainment, no distraction. Just shared stillness. And in that stillness, there's a kind of warmth that even fire can't match. A warmth made of presence, of solidarity, of knowing I'm not cold alone. The 96th trick is ancestral. The trick of knowing they were not the first. They remember the faces of those who came before. Grandparents who boiled cloth to make broth. Aunts who slept in stables with animals for Warmth. Mothers who told stories not to entertain, but to distract children from their own shivering. This lineage of survival becomes identity. If they did it, I can too. The cold, then, is not a punishment. It is an inheritance to be worn and someday passed on. The 97th trick is poetic. The trick of naming warmth. Just as they name the cold, they name the warmth. The kettle becomes the heart. The thickest blanket is called the shield. The patch of sunlight that sneaks through the cracked window is known as the blessing. This language changes the way they interact with their space. When they say, "Put the heart on the stove," they aren't just boiling water, they're reviving themselves. The 98th trick is spiritual. The trick of letting go. Sometimes the poor realize that clinging too tightly to control, to comfort, to expectations only sharpens the cold. So they let go. They surrender to the night. They sleep with the chill in their bones and say, "This too is life." They stop resisting, and in doing so, discover that some warmth rises not from fire, but from surrender. The 99th trick is seasonal. The trick of marking time. They light a candle not just for light, but to mark the passage of another day. They scratch a line into the wood by the door. They track the sun's path on the wall. This tracking is more than record keeping. It's a declaration. I am still here. Time is not just passing, it is being witnessed. And the final 100th trick. It's the most powerful of all. The trick of kindness. In the coldest times, the poor give to each other. A blanket passed, a crust of bread shared, a silence held gently for someone else. Kindness, in extreme cold, is not charity, it's survival. It's the warmth no storm can freeze. And so, when the snow piles higher, when the nights stretch longer, when the breath curls tighter in the chest, they return to these tricks, not because they're written in books, but because they are carved into the soul. And in this, the poorest become the richest in wisdom. In resilience. In warmth.